You've done the hard work, built up your super, and now you're finally retired. But here's the sad truth. Usually, it's only a matter of time before Australian retirees that don't have an advisor watching their back fall into one of the most common retirement or superannuation traps, and it ends up costing them thousands. So in this video, we're going to walk through the under-the-radar retirement traps that often catch retirees out and what you can do about them. Now, there's 8 traps I want to talk about, and these can be whether you're in the lead up to retirement, you're transitioning to retirement, or even when you enter retirement. The first one I want to talk about, and is all too common, it seems to happen all the time, which is people failing to lodge their notice of intent to claim form, which is related to their concessional contributions. That is your superannuation guarantee, your salary sacrifice, and your post-tax contributions that you're claiming a tax deduction on. This is where your notice of intent to claim form comes in. You can also do it for your spouse. So what the notice of intent to claim form is, or according to the ATO, it's called an NAT 71121. This is the document you need to lodge to claim the tax deductions associated with the concessional contributions that you're making on top of your employer income or on top of your salary sacrifice income. And it's even more important if you're self-employed and you're making these contributions yourself. You can also use it to amend what you suggested or applied for in the previous year. But there's a couple of things that people forget about and that catch people out, and that is it has to be lodged before you lodge your tax return for that year. So if you're lodging a tax return for financial year 2025, you're trying to be efficient, you need to make sure you've lodged your notice of intent to claim with your superannuation fund before you lodge your tax return, or alternatively, it has to be before 30 June the following financial year. So if it's for 2025 financial year, it has to be lodged before 30 June 2026 if you haven't lodged your tax return. It also needs to be lodged, and here's a big one for retirees, before you commence a pension from your accumulation balance. If you don't, you can't reverse it. You're going to lose those tax deductions that you could have had, meaning your taxable income is likely to be higher. Similarly, you also need to make sure you lodge it before you roll over your super fund. If you're seeing an advisor, if you're changing from an industry fund to an SMSF or another option as you get closer to retirement and want a bit more control, then you need to lodge it before you execute that rollover. Otherwise, again, those tax deductions can be lost. If you don't do this, thousands of dollars could disappear. A swipe of a pen and that money is gone. Another one that happens all too often is particularly relevant to those in SMSFs, which are incredibly popular both among the young and the retirees. In fact, the vast majority of SMSF trustees are in retirement and drawing money from their superannuation fund. This can be hugely costly. The key here is that you have to draw your minimum pension amount. Otherwise, your superannuation fund could become completely taxable. Your pension payment, again, this is the key here, is reset each financial year. It is based on your age as of 1 July of the financial year in which you're measuring. So for the FY 25-26 financial year, your 1 July 2025 balance, which you may not even have yet because you've unlikely done your tax return because you probably haven't received all the tax documents you need from your investments. You calculate your age on that day, but then you also calculate the value of your assets on that day. And if you're not getting your tax return until, say, November or December, which is commonly the case for an SMSF, you don't know what your minimum is until halfway through the financial year. That said, you can be consistently drawing what you were in the previous year and have some sort of idea, but you'll never be able to confirm until you have that audited final amount. This, again, can be rounded to the nearest 10, and interestingly, the use of platforms like Colonial First State or Hub24 actually removes the risk of this mistake because the superannuation fund, being Colonial First State, acts as the trustee, not as your fund manager or your advisor, but as the trustee, and ensures you meet your minimum pension requirements and the other regulatory requirements each year. If you stuff this up as an SMSF trustee, though, it turns your fund back into accumulation phase and you're going to pay significantly more tax than if you just drawn that extra 10, 20, 30, could be a couple of $1,000s. So you could be up for a tax bill in the thousands if you miss this one. The next trap I want to talk about, we covered this in a previous video. I suggest you go look at this to make sure you don't get caught out by one of these scams that are going around, but marketing and financial scams. We shouldn't need to say this again, but as we've covered, heavy marketing and financial scams can come at a massive cost. Long-term returns from balanced growth portfolios, so those with around 60% in growth assets, are something like 7 to 8%. If someone's promising high returns, don't believe them. Returns have been fairly strong in the last few years, but long-term returns, if someone's modeling or promising them well above that amount, it's very unlikely, likely high risk, or most likely not able to be achieved. Don't transfer money to accounts you aren't aware of, so never transfer your money unless it's the payment of fees to your financial advisor. And there's never any urgency when it comes to making decisions with your superannuation fund or your investments. You can take time, you can ask people, you can ask friends, you can ask advisors, accountants, other trusted professionals. There's so many people out there selling get-rich-quick schemes on trading platforms, but the key here is if they knew the secret, if they knew how it worked and if their system worked, they wouldn't be doing this. They would would still be working. Now, the next one I want to talk about, moving on from scams, is not commencing your pension as soon as you should, or you could possibly. This is a massive cost, and it's an opportunity cost of this. Only 3 to 4% of most industry super fund members, particularly those large industry super funds, have commenced a pension. There could be 2 reasons for this. One, it could be because most of them leave at retirement and want more control, more transparency, and the ability to ask questions of their superannuation manager. Another reason is they just failed to turn this tap on when they could, and a part of this is the communication that comes from the large industry super funds, in our experience as well. You can access your super from 60 if you stop work, or even if you don't stop work, or if you turn 65, you can access your super under any circumstances and complete access to it as well. In almost all situations, it's worth starting a pension once you actually attain these ages because of the huge tax benefits you can get from it. Again, this has to consider your overall tax situation, what the impact of those taking that money out, and whether you can recontribute if you're not spending it. But the tax exemption you receive by commencing a pension compared to accumulation can add as much as 1.5 to 2% to your compounding return each year, which over the long term can be huge. It is huge for anyone that is able to do this. The next one I want to talk about is we tend to forget about our longevity. That is, we forget how long we're going to live, and we make decisions based on a very short-term view. And every time I talk about this on a video, people don't believe me, but believe me or not, most people are living well into their 90s in Australia and are expected to live into the mid-90s, particularly members of couples. Good healthcare, lots of money, and better lifestyles mean longevity is a growing problem, but also an opportunity. If you're going to live for 30 years, your entire approach to retirement needs to change. That's 30 years that your capital needs to last without you being able to add back to it. Protecting your capital becomes as important as growing it. So does the resilience of the income, but also the resilience of the growth. You can't afford not to be exposed to the artificial intelligence boom that's happening at the moment, all the data center boom, all the infrastructure spend, all these other opportunities. You need to be exposed to both income and growth to have any hope of your capital lasting for self-funded retirees for that full 30-year period. One key here is, and we've talked about this in our previous video, talked about how to invest when the market's at all-time highs, but you can't avoid bubbles and crashes altogether. You need to be able to limit your exposure and the risk that you're taking in adding certain investments to your portfolio. So always seek diversification and risk-reducing opportunities, but most importantly, even as a retiree, beginning, middle, to even towards the end, you need to go for growth. This extends to the next point I wanted to make, which is forgetting about inflation. For many years, or even our working years, inflation has never been a problem. That is, inflation describes the cost of products and cost of living that you're spending each year, and how the cost of most of the things we're buying has gone up significantly in the last few years. It's just a measure of a basket of goods and services that most people spend on, and it reflects how the cost of that has gone up from one year to another. Inflation is now decisively higher than the last 30 years, meaning interest rates are higher, but so is food, drinks, lifestyle, travel, and pretty much everything else. And inflation hits different groups differently. So how do you combat inflation? First, you need to consider it within your retirement modelling, because $100,000 in income you need today is actually $103,000 in income you need tomorrow. And then you need to consider it within your investments. So if you're a self-funded retiree trying to draw an increasing amount based on inflation of the original amount that you need, the only option is to ensure both your dividends grow and your capital grows. Otherwise, you're going to be digging into that capital every year and increasing the speed at which you run out of money. Now, Telstra isn't going to cut it alone. Not saying Telstra isn't a good company, but holding Telstra alone for the dividend isn't going to help. You need to be exposed to the trends, to the markets, to the themes, to the countries, to the opportunities that will drive the economy forward for the decades to come. Think tech, infrastructure, cybersecurity, energy, all these sectors, and plenty of sectors that are going to be invented in the next 10, 20, 30 years during your retirement as well. Now, the second last one I want to talk about is too many people pay off debt too late or take on too much debt too close to retirement. Don't get me wrong, debt is fantastic. When you have a taxable income, you get huge benefit from tax deductions and negative gearing, and you have time on your side. But it can be an anchor to your success and your retirement and your emotional state when you don't have time on your side. High interest rates, like those you hold through SMSFs, can be the bane of your retirement. Even most interest rates on mortgages these days are anywhere from 5 to 6%. Non-deductible debt is wasted if you could be paying it off, particularly as you get closer to retirement, and freeing up cash flow is king, as it allows you to put more money towards compounding your assets sooner. Similarly, leveraging up as you near retirement and will be gaining access to super is simply in most cases not beneficial, as the tax deductions become less valuable and the benefit of these strategies reduces significantly. Now, the last thing I want to talk about, and this has become quite topical recently, is too many people overestimate their eligibility for the age pension. So many people with, in self-funded retirees that I work with think that because they've paid tax their entire life, they'll be entitled to some sort of government pension. Unfortunately, this isn't the case. So many people overestimate their eligibility for the age pension. Firstly, the age pension doesn't kick in for an extremely long time. You actually have to be over 67 before you can even apply. You then need to have less than $321,500 as a single person with a house, or less than $481,500 as a couple combined to get the full pension. And the full pension isn't huge either. For a past pension, you have to have less than $714,000 as a single person and less than $1,074,000 as a couple, excluding your home, but including most assets, including superannuation, shares, term deposits, and the like. This is without even mentioning the income test, which also includes your superannuation. Importantly, this doesn't include your house. That said, just because you aren't eligible for the age pension, you may still be able to get some benefits and discounts from the government. One of those is the Commonwealth Seniors Healthcare Card. They can give access to healthcare discounts, access to the Pharmaceutical Benefits or PBS scheme. And for those looking to get the Commonwealth Seniors Healthcare Card, you have to have assessable income of less than $101,105 as a single and $161,768 as a couple, which includes the deeming of assets like superannuation, pensions, accumulation, term deposits, shares, and everything else. So once again, thank you for watching. I hope this helps. If this helps you avoid one single trap or mistake and say it could save you $1,000 in retirement, please like the page, please like this video, please subscribe, and please reach out if you're a self-funded retiree looking for advice.